him to be able to somehow communicate to you what's really happening in your country, because after all, it is your country. We're not elected to be the ruling class. We're elected to be the servant class. You are the ruling class, and don't ever let anyone take that from you or ever let you forget it. Sometimes we think that we elevate people to these positions, whether it's president or governor or whatever it may be, and that somehow puts them above us. Actually, our founding fathers had a very different and a very radical idea. These jobs don't put us above anybody. It puts us in a position so that we remember who the boss is. My first day in office in the governor's office, I put a frame up in the outer office. It said, "Our boss." A little inscription on a brass plaque right beneath the photo, "Our boss." Frame photo. First thing you saw when you came to the governor's office was that frame. It stayed there until January 9th of this year when I left office. We took it off the wall that day. I personally took it off the wall and went into our archives. By the way, my picture was never in that frame in 10.5 years. Because I wanted my staff and I wanted everyone who walked into that door to know that the boss is not the guy in the corner office with a nice view of the Arkansas River. The boss is 2.7 million people out around that state in 75 counties who had elected us. They were not our interruption. They were not our interference. They were our job. They were our boss. That picture sometimes would be of a kid getting his Eagle Scout award. Sometimes it'd be a couple on their 50th wedding anniversary. Sometimes it'd be a kid who had killed his first turkey. He'd be so proudly holding it up. I saw a nice turkey over here in the corner, didn't I, Tony? I thought it was one of my opponents there for a minute. That'll make the vlogs. But we always put somebody's picture up there. Every week or two we changed the picture, but we reminded ourselves that that's who we worked for. That was who the boss really is. That's what I think we need to re-examine in this country when it comes to our politics. This coming week on the 3rd of January when the caucuses are held, Iowa has a chance to make an incredibly bold and pretty amazing statement. Because a lot of people have just said the conventional wisdom of politics is that whoever has the most money is most likely to win. Now, I've been outspent by Mitt Romney in this state 20 to 1. 20 to 1. For every dollar I've had to spend in Iowa, he's spent 20. There's no way I'm supposed to win. I'm not even supposed to be competing in the game at this point. The fact that we are in a position to be in one of the top slots is truly, in itself, amazing. If we were to win, it would be of seismic quality on the political Richter scale. And I'm going to ask you to help us do that. And that's a pretty bold ask, but I think it would be an amazing statement. I'll tell you what it would do. It would forever enshrine the Iowa caucus as an absolute must-do for future people that want to be president. Because if a guy like me, outspent 20 to 1, can come to Iowa and launch what will become an effort to take it all the way to the White House, then for the future and for all time, it's going to be that no longer is just about money. It is about what a person believes, who a person is, what he's done, and whether he's been consistent. You're not going to find moments on YouTube of me saying something different about the sanctity of human life today than I said 10 years ago, 10 minutes ago, or 50 years ago. You're not going to find something on YouTube where I said something completely different about gun ownership and the Second Amendment than I did last week, last year, 10 years ago. You're not going to hear me making up stuff about my biography. I don't go around saying I'm a lifelong golfer, because I once rode in a golf cart when I was 8 years old. You're not going to hear me talk about how that I once was, a person who was the other side of the issue when it came to the Reagan-Bush legacy and didn't believe in it, was an independent. But now I love Ronald Reagan. I loved Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan first ran for office. What I want to tell you today is that you need a president who gets the job honestly. Because if I don't get it honestly, I won't serve honestly. And if I don't tell you the truth about how I apply for the job, I probably won't tell you the truth if I get the job. Many of you have employed people, and you know that when folks don't tell you what's straight up coming in, they won't tell you straight up when they get in. And chances are, if you knew that, you wouldn't hire them. And what I'm saying to you is that if my opponent says, He increased taxes. Well, you know what? I cut 94 taxes. And the taxes we cut eliminated the marriage penalty. It indexed the income tax for inflation. It lowered the floor and ceiling upon which people pay taxes. It also cut capital gains taxes. We created the Property Taxpayer Bill of Rights. We froze property taxes for people 65 and older so they didn't lose their home. And we made sure that people did not have property tax increases of more than a few percentage points a year so that they didn't have the sticker shock of going from a small property tax bill to a huge one and end up having to sell their home to pay for it. Those are tax cuts that made a difference. And by the way, they were the first broad-based tax cuts in the 160-year history of my state. My opponent, Mitt Romney, will tell you that I raised spending by this extraordinary amount. The New York Times has an interesting article, I think it came out yesterday, and it did a little fact-checking and found out that the increases in spending in my state were not some gargantuan number that he's been reporting. And I'm quoting them now. By the way, I've come to love the New York Times just the last couple of days. But the point is, they point out that if you adjusted for inflation, it was comparable to what it went up in Massachusetts. It was like 3-something% per year, which is pretty modest. And part of that is adjusted for the fact that we changed accounting methods, because when I became governor, imagine this, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise had a cash accounting system, which is outrageous if you know anything about accounting. We made a major overhaul in how we accounted for the taxpayers' money. That's part of the reason that it looked like the budget changed. When we went to an accrual accounting system, and I'm not trying to be technical, but I'm just telling you, for the first time in my state's history, we actually knew where the taxpayers' money went. That's responsible leadership, and that's something that we need at the federal level. We need transparency in how your federal dollars are being spent. You ought to be able to find out, how did the government spend your money? And we need a transparent tax system, and that's why I would like to see the fair tax implemented. It wouldn't penalize productivity, but in fact it would encourage people to work and to earn.
Amen.
That's the kind of system that we desperately need in this nation, and if I'm president, I'll work my heart out to change it, so that if you're a guy that wants to go into a business for yourself and start a small business, and by the way, 80% of the jobs in this country come from small business guys who started out with nothing more than a dream on top of their kitchen table, sketching it out on the napkin and showing their wife and saying, "What do you think?" And she said, "You're nuts. What do you think? You got a job. Hang on to it." But he kept dreaming and believing and talking, and one day he took out a bank loan and he's scared to death because what if it doesn't work? You know, the sad thing, a lot of times it doesn't work, and the reason it doesn't work is not because it wasn't a good idea, not because he didn't work his guts out to make it happen. It didn't work because his competition, his stiffest obstacle, was from his own government, whose system of taxation, regulation, and litigation made it impossible for him to succeed in a dream that could have happened. You know, I'm not the favorite of the Wall Street guys. I understand that. And I'm real proud of me. But I'll tell you who I want to be, the guy that people care about. That's the Main Street guys. Those guys who are starting out, those small businesses, who are running a dry cleaners or a store, or starting a business. Sometimes those small businesses become the big ones, the really big ones. But most of them started out real small. We got a little store in our state. Started out with a guy that lost his lease on a 5-and-dime store in Newport, Arkansas. When he lost the lease, he thought about just quitting and finding something else and going to work for someone else. He'd managed the store for a while. He thought, you know, I can do this business and I can do it better. And he moved to another town over in the northwest part of our state. And he started his own little store. And he thought, you know, if I had another store, I could have the economy of scale of 2 stores rather than 1. And one thing led to another. And he had ideas about how he could distribute his merchandise, how he could keep his prices low and bring more customers in, work off more volume rather than on higher profit margins. And you know, it almost worked. The guy's name was Sam Walton, and the little enterprise he started was Walmart. Love him or hate him, you got to say this about Walmart. They understood something about taking simply American dreams and turning them into something that absolutely has changed the way marketing has happened. The Dillard store in Arkansas started when Mr. Bill Dillard inherited a lot of his father's debts from the Depression in Nashville, Arkansas, at a dry goods store. He literally swept the wooden floors of his dad's store, and he personally promised he would pay every creditor so his dad's name would not be sullied. And he worked for years until every last penny of every last debt was paid. And from that little dry goods store in Nashville, Arkansas, 25 miles from where I grew up in Hope, became the Dillard's department store.